So let's start with talking about the level of understanding of autism in Singapore.
hmm So for Singapore itself, we do have like an annual event where we call it Purple Parade. This is to actually raise awareness and campaign for the inclusion of the disabled in Singapore. So I would say when I was actually younger, there was no educational learning like what is special needs, what is inclusive community, what is disability. So from young itself, we are not open to all this. So if in regards to awareness, I would say it's pretty much low in understanding like what is autism, unless you are an educational person, a medical line,
Mm.
or you're actually a parent whereby your son or your daughter is diagnosed with this disability.
hmm
Mhm.
Is it that people don't know what it is, like they haven't heard of it before, or they just think it's something else?
They have never heard of it before. Because let's say if we were talking about Down syndrome, it's pretty much
hmm
clear that you can see the disability of a person. Whereas something got to do with neurological, they may not know like what is autism, because at times when I share my friend, my child has autism, so that's where he has meltdowns and all that. So they will actually question me like, what is autism? I've never heard of autism before. But I know that government has been trying very much to push this awareness about autism. And I just give you an example. I had an exchange session with a friend. She was also one of the advocates in Singapore as well. So she was sharing with me that they actually do a play card during the autism month in April. So they were going around the street to actually speak to strangers and say, do you actually like to hold a play card with us to show that your acceptance of autism and your awareness of autism? So among 200 people that they actually approach, it's only like 10% of them would actually say yes, and then out of this 10%, they would say that, okay, I would actually help you hold the play card, but do not take my picture. So it's definitely that there's no acceptance as well in terms of autism.
I see. Is there a stigma related to disabilities in Singapore?
I would say yes, somewhere or other, because in Singapore we actually have a multiracial and pretty much close and quite more of traditional culture, I would say. So when someone sees a disability, they will often relate like it must either be the parents' genetic, or it's either that is their parents' karma, or it's either that is some disturbance of supernatural doings and all this. So disability is only associated more of like physical. It is not really like neurological that they understand about. So in terms of the stigma in the culture itself in Singapore, people pretty much doesn't want to talk about disability of their child because they find that it's something of a weakness and they don't want to talk about it.
Okay. So when your son was diagnosed, had you heard of autism before?
Personally, not at all. So the only time I actually realized or understand a little bit more what is autism, because I have an elder sister who is actually a special needs teacher. So she was actually sharing with me that she saw some red flags in my son. So she said, perhaps your son may has autism. So I asked her actually, what is autism? So she explained to me what is autism spectrum, what is the diagnosis, and what are you expecting in terms of the speech delay and all that. And that's where I start to relate. That's the reason why my son has a speech delay. That's why he has problem in socializing with people. So in other words, I do not even know what is autism actually.
Okay, so you had to go and kind of educate yourself.
Yes, you're right.
How did the stigma and how does it still affect your family's understanding of your son?
hmm So I would give some experience in terms of going to public. Yeah. Last time when my son has a terrible meltdown, I still have difficulties of understanding how am I supposed to actually help him. In other words, when he have those terrible meltdown. So I myself and my husband, there was one point of time where we were so afraid to go out. We were so afraid to actually put our son out there, and people would usually give a judgmental view of our son. So, an example, let's say if I were to go out, my son has a terrible meltdown. People would actually look at us and they would think that we doesn't teach our son properly or educate our son how to behave in public. Which, in other words, they do not understand that he has a special needs that no one understands. So, in terms of the
hmm
stigma itself, in terms of the public and the community, how they actually react towards this disability of autism, I would say it's still a stigma over here.
Do they ever say anything to you?
There was a couple of, I would say there's also good and also kind of bad experience. So maybe I shared the terrible experience I ever experienced before. There was once I actually went for a play date for autism child. So after the play date, we decided like, okay, let's go for a little shopping at the mall. So I guessed my son wanted to really so much go into one of the shops in the store, and then he starts to have a terrible meltdown when I say that it's time to go. So he started to actually cry, roll down the floor, and at that point of time, me and my husband was trying very much to help. In other words, try to put him together. So to try and put the situation better, we actually brought him out of the mall. And there was a couple in front of us who actually look at us and they actually closed their ears to show how irritated they are with my son behavior. And
Mm.
that really caused much of a pain, to be honest, emotionally, because I'm really trying my best to actually try to put the things together. But in other words, you should be understanding enough. I don't also choose to have this situation at that point of time. So that was one of the experience that I actually received as well from community. Yeah.
Mm. Hmm. And what about the positive experience?
Yeah. So referring back to the play date, there was one lady, until today I still remember her. So she was going through a hard time. Her son does has autism as well, but another son of hers, she was going through a major brain operation. So she was sharing with the parents and educators over there about the hard time that she actually going through. And at that point of time, my son was there. He was actually listening to a conversation. He came over to her and hold her hand. And then she
Mm.
actually connected with me, direct DM me in Instagram, and she was saying that, you know what, you're such an amazing parent. You really taught your son well. And, you know, that was what I need. Just someone to hold my hand and says that everything is going to be okay. And it's just so wonderful that your son does that. So, in other words, I felt that, okay, there's someone out there in the community that appreciate, my son, in other words, on his behavior and all that. And people think that kids with autism, they don't have any feelings. They do. They have feelings, just that they cannot express themselves. That's all.
Hmm. Yeah.
Hmm.
That's really sweet that he
Yeah.
did that.
Yes. Yes.
So, how about your extended family? Do they understand your son's diagnosis? Do you have a hard time explaining it to them?
Hmm. Hmm. To be honest, my side, they were pretty much understanding. They gave a lot of support because at first some of them doesn't know what is autism. So after my sister actually explained to them what is autism all about, they gave a lot of support. Even my late father, he also gives support by sending my son to therapy session every weekends. I do have a helper at home as well. She tries much to be understanding on my son's condition. So we educate everyone along the way. But they include him as well in the play, even the cousins as well, despite his condition. Last time I still remember my nephew and niece ever asked, why is he not talking? Why is he not responding? Why does he doesn't want to play? But after we actually explained to him, he's a bit different. He's a bit special. So in other words, we do have a lot of support. But from my husband's side, my husband is an Indonesian. So again, Indonesia culture as well, community, they are pretty much closed. Autism itself, because it's not so known as well, because he doesn't come from Jakarta. I think Jakarta is much more, I would say, stronger in terms of understanding and awareness. He comes from Jogja. So when we try to explain to his family members, my son is diagnosed with autism, I do not know whether it's more of a denial, but they were saying that, are you sure that Narcis has autism? I don't think so. Maybe he's just, what do we call it, late boomers, a bit slow in understanding things. So that's how it is. It's a bit different in terms of, I would say, acceptance as well for both family.
Mm-hmm. And in Singapore, because it's kind of a melting pot of different cultures,
Hmm.
uh, do you think there's a difference in the attitudes towards autism from the different cultures in Singapore?
It does actually. When I speak to someone who is from, let's say, a Chinese background, they will also say the same thing and they face the same stigma as well. They will say that, for every Chinese family, whenever they came to the person's house, they need to actually acknowledge the uncle or the older ones. So when the acknowledgement was not there, they find that, again, you didn't teach your son or your daughter properly in terms of manners.
Mm.
Same goes for the Malay community. Some would think that is supernatural, disturbance and this kind of thing. So different culture have different beliefs. The stigma is still pretty much strong in different culture as well over here.
Mm. Okay. And do you notice a difference in how mothers and fathers deal with and process their child's diagnosis there? You've been watching Autism Knows No Borders. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Also, we'd love to hear from you, so let us know what you think in the comments section. Click here to watch this interview in its entirety. You can also find us on your favorite podcast app. Tune in each week for engaging conversations of how people across the globe are inspiring change and building community. Thanks for watching. Take care.